whatever the case is, it's not the ultra-right wing or the right wing in Israel's will. It is the will of the whole Israeli society. It is what the majority of the Israelis want. I can say that the Masjid al-Ibrahimi or the Ibrahimi Mosque is the example of what is being planned for al-Aqsa Mosque. The final step that the Israeli government is trying or thinking of doing in al-Aqsa Mosque is to put al-Aqsa Mosque under the full Israeli sovereignty and the full Israeli administration. And they just want the al-Aqsa Mosque for themselves in order to have the temple and for the messianic understanding of the texts and for the history. And that is very dangerous because it takes the whole struggle and the whole clash in the region to a totally different horizon, because it takes it from a political issue, from an occupation, a political occupation, to a religious war. The 56 countries, the 56 Muslim nations around the world. It is not a Jordanian place. It is not a Palestinian place. It is a Muslim place. So this question has to be addressed to them. Why didn't these governments do something before the 5 prayers that you pray as a Muslim every day arrived at your home, whether you are, for example, in London, or in Washington, D.C., in Kuala Lumpur, in Mumbai, in wherever. Before it arrived to you, it passed through al-Aqsa.
During one of the holiest times for Muslims, Israel had closed al-Aqsa Mosque to Muslim worshippers. For over 40 days, Palestinian worshippers were not allowed at one of Islam's holiest sites. Israel cited the war with Iran as posing security threats during religious gatherings, but it also allowed Jewish settlers to storm the compound, and elsewhere, Jewish gatherings were allowed to take place. Abdullah Marouf is a renowned scholar, an expert of early Islamic history, and former media director for Al-Aqsa itself. Speaking to Middle East Eye, Dr. Marouf discusses the site's religious importance and how the history around it is being rewritten to adapt to a messianic understanding of Judaic texts, thus establishing an unprecedented threat in Israel's takeover of one of Islam's holiest places.
Al-Aqsa was reopened for Jummah for the first time since before Ramadan, basically, and settlers stormed the premises again. So if you could comment on the increased limitation for Muslim worshippers and how there is also on the other side a normalization of settler incursions.
Actually, the incursion was the reason why Al-Aqsa Mosque was open, in my opinion. At least in my opinion, I think that the Israeli government wanted to open Al-Aqsa Mosque on that day, Thursday, the 9th, in order to make it available for the settlers to break into Al-Aqsa Mosque and to enter and perform their rituals inside Al-Aqsa Mosque at the end of the Pesach or the Passover. And that was the main reason, in my opinion, for opening Al-Aqsa Mosque on that time, on that day in particular. Other than that, otherwise, we've noticed something on Thursday morning, that the Muslims were allowed to perform their Fajr prayer, the dawn prayer, but after just about 45 minutes of entering Al-Aqsa Mosque, after the Adhan, and once the prayer was done, about 3,000 to 5,000 people who were praying inside Al-Aqsa Mosque were forcibly driven out of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and by force the Israelis actually kicked them out, literally speaking, and they actually beat some people in order to expel them from the Al-Aqsa Mosque, in order to allow the settlers to enter the premises at 6:30. These incursions happened now for 6.5 hours for the first time ever. It's the first time that the Israelis open Al-Aqsa Mosque at 6:30, not at 7 o'clock for the settlers. In 2003, when the Israeli government started allowing the settlers to break into Al-Aqsa Mosque on their own, without any coordination with the Muslim Waqf, or without any acceptance or approval of the Muslim Waqf authorities, they allowed them at that time to break into Al-Aqsa Mosque only for 3 hours, from 7 to 10. That was all. And this will take us all the way, if it remains as it is, with the same speed, at the same circumstances, at the same way it is done now, it will take us to a time that we see equal times for Muslims and Jews, well, inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. And here, we will find the settlers entering Al-Aqsa Mosque for 9 hours. And that is the aim that the Israeli government, that this very Israeli government actually gave a commitment. So it's not actually about opening Al-Aqsa only. It was not opened by the will of the Palestinian people or the Muslim Waqf. And that is the most important thing. It was closed by the will of the Israeli government and was opened as well by the will and the direct orders of the Israeli government according to the benefits of the Israelis, not for the Muslims. And that is why we've seen the beating of the Muslims after just 45 minutes of entering Al-Aqsa Mosque on Thursday, unfortunately. Actually, I can say that the Masjid al-Ibrahimi or the Ibrahimi Mosque is the example of what is being planned for Al-Aqsa Mosque. Ultimately, if I can say the final step that the Israeli government is trying or thinking of doing in Al-Aqsa Mosque is to put Al-Aqsa Mosque under the full Israeli sovereignty and the full Israeli administration. And this is what happened in the Masjid al-Ibrahimi. And it is actually almost exactly in the same pattern that has been happening. And in Masjid al-Ibrahimi, we've seen that that after 1967, times were allocated for the Israeli settlers, and these times were expanded and extended over time until 1994, when the massacre of Masjid al-Ibrahimi happened. By the way, by the mentor and friend of Itamar Ben-Gvir, Baruch Goldstein.
They found photos of him in his
Yes,
house,
yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah,
He had a photo of him in his house.
yeah, yeah.
Actually, so he was like a mentor for him. After that massacre, the Israelis, rather than being banned, the Israeli settlers, rather than being banned from entering Al-Aqsa, the Masjid al-Ibrahimi, they were given like, I don't know, a prize, if I can say. They were given 54 to 55% of the mosque. So it was divided on the ground. It was divided between the Muslims and the settlers. And this remained all the time until 2009, when the Israeli government at that time, in 2009, declared that Al-Masjid al-Ibrahimi, Al-Ibrahimi Mosque is part of, or was part of the Jewish heritage. So what does that mean? It means that if I can speak here from a legal point of view, according to the Israeli government, by this word, part of the Jewish heritage, they meant that it was no longer a mosque where the Jews or the Jewish people were allowed to pray in. It was turned into a synagogue where the Muslims were allowed to pray in. And this remained from 2009 until 2024. In 2024, the final steps started happening until the end of 2025. In 2025, the Israeli government issued two declarations regarding that mosque. One of them was to let the religious administration of the Masjid al-Ibrahimi being taken from the Muslim Waqf, the Muslim Palestinian Waqf, of course, that is part of the Palestinian Authority, to the religious council of the illegal settlement of Kiryat Arba. Not even the Ministry of Religions of Israel. So you can see what is happening here. The second one was to take the administrative power of maintenance in Masjid al-Ibrahimi from the Hebron municipality, the Palestinian Hebron municipality, and give it to the Israeli army, who's illegally occupying the West Bank, as we know. So this is the final step. That tells us that this is what the Israelis want for Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, they started in 2003 claiming that they just want to visit without any prayers. 2 years ago, in 2024, Itamar Ben-Gvir issued a declaration claiming that the settlers can perform their prayers and their rituals publicly inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. And now, at the end of 2025, as I mentioned before, they gave a commitment. The Israeli government gave a commitment to these fanatics in order to give them more time in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this is what is being applied now and what is being happening and right in front of our eyes. If this passes, we will see that this expansion will go all the way to be applied at the end on the ground. So they are planning to take the eastern side of Al-Aqsa Mosque and allocating it for good for the Israeli settlers. And by the way, even if they, God forbid, may Allah forbid, if they succeed in doing that, if they succeed in doing that, they will not end the story. And this will not be the end of the story. They will expand it until they take control of the whole mosque. No force on earth can convince us that the Israelis are not planning to take over the whole of Al-Aqsa Mosque. There is absolutely no force whatsoever that can convince us that Israel will just take parts of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and it will be the end of the story. Why? Because we have an example and we are not stupid. We have an example that is only 30 kilometers away to the south of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it is called Masjid al-Ibrahimi, al-Ibrahimi Mosque. And they are clear in saying that they want to build a temple rather than Al-Aqsa Mosque. With regarding to the idea of what is the percentage of the Israelis who are pro division of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Haaretz, the well-known newspaper in Israel, said many years ago, they said that there is almost a consensus in the Israeli society regarding the right for the Jewish people to pray on the so-called Temple Mount, which is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this does not involve only the religious fanatics or the right wing or the left wing. Even the ultra left wing in Israel and the liberal forces in Israel believe that the Jewish people has the right to pray or to perform their rituals inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Whatever the case is, it's not the ultra right wing or the right wing in Israel's opinion or will. It is the will of the whole Israeli society. It is what the majority of the Israelis want. And that is something that's quite disturbing. Why? Because if we speak about the issue from a historical point of view, in the year 637 CE, when the Muslims arrived in Jerusalem under the leadership of the second Muslim Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, we know that Muslims did not take the Al-Aqsa Mosque from anybody. Why? Simply because Al-Aqsa Mosque was outside the city of Jerusalem at that time. It was outside the walls of the city of Jerusalem at that time. So the Muslims did not come and take it and say that this was the place or the temple was blah, 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 etc. and take it. No, that was not the issue. So no one else has the right now to claim any part of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and taking it from the Muslims. That is the thing that the whole world need to understand. And this was applied for the Al-Buraq wall, or the what is called in Israel the Western Wall, and it was a full rule by the League of Nations in 1930, I think. No, sorry, 1931, I think, that the wall, the Western Wall, or the Al-Buraq wall, is solely for the Muslims, is solely owned by the Muslims, and it's not for anybody, and no one else has the right in that wall. So what happened afterwards was that Israel illegally occupied Jerusalem, the eastern side of the city, and they illegally occupied the old city of Jerusalem, illegally occupied the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And no one was allowed to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And by the way, this was not something odd. It was not something out of the blue. It was something very deeply understandable in the Jewish faith. Why? Because up until now, the chief rabbinate of Israel and the Orthodox Jewish rabbis believe that Jews do not have the right to enter the premises of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Even though when they believe that it is the temple, the area of the temple, they believe that it is not allowed for anyone to enter. It is a restricted area. By the way, there are still two signs put near the Al-Maghariba gate and near a Silsila gate, the gate of the chain of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, signed by the chief rabbinate of Israel, and says that it is not allowed. This place is a restricted area and no one is allowed to enter this region. Now, this is taken from a different perspective, of course, because we know that archaeologically speaking, there's absolutely no traces were found that dated to the time of Solomon or the time of Herod or whoever inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And that is something that is challenging for the Israelis today, and it is challenging for the Israeli Department of Antiquities, because they couldn't find anything that is related or proving actually that this was the land where the temple was there. But that's not my case. My case is totally different here. My case is that this place was not taken from anybody by Muslims. Muslims took it from outside. It was a wilderness, it was outside the city of Jerusalem, outside the premises of the city. Muslims claimed it. No one said no. And by the way, at that time, we know that Jews were there after the Muslim entrance of the city of Jerusalem to the city of Jerusalem. Jewish communities re-established in the city of Jerusalem under the Muslim rule since the time of Umar ibn Khattab all the way until the time of the Crusaders. And after the Crusaders, when Salah ad-Din came again and liberated the city from the Crusaders, he re-established as well the Jewish community inside the city of Jerusalem. But that is not the case here when it comes to force, because Israel is not actually abiding by any laws when it comes to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They just want the Al-Aqsa Mosque for themselves in order to have the temple, and we know that the ultra-right wing in Israel wants it for them Messianic, for the coming of the Messiah and for the Messianic understanding of the texts and for the history. And that is very dangerous because it takes the whole struggle and the whole clash in the region to a totally different horizon, because it takes it from a political issue, from an occupation, a political occupation, to a religious war. And we know what a religious war imply. It implies a serious issue, and this will not be limited to the land. It will go all over the world, and this is why it is very dangerous, actually.
So my next question is, in practice right now, what does the Waqf and more broadly the Islamic powers in the Arab world, but even in the world in general, have right now over Al-Aqsa? Why are other Muslim leaders not acting to intervene to save Al-Aqsa from this very real threat?
That question needs to be asked to the Muslim leaders, actually. That question needs to be addressed to the Islamic or to the Muslim states' governments, actually, to the Muslim governments. I'm not here speaking about the Arab governments only. I'm speaking about the Muslim governments. 56 Muslim governments around the world were actually are members of the organization called the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation, as we know, the OIC. And this organization was established in 1969 as a result of burning Al-Aqsa Mosque. So it was a result of the issue of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. However, up until now, unfortunately, we could not find anything that is useful, if I can say, or effective, not useful only, effective, when it comes to pushing Israel towards just withdrawing from Al-Aqsa Mosque, or at least stop their violations of the status quo of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I'm not here speaking about only Jordan, especially when you know that Jordan is the government that has got the right sovereignty over the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but I'm speaking about the 56 countries, the 56 Muslim nations around the world. It is not a Jordanian place. It is not a Palestinian place. It is a Muslim place. So this question has to be addressed to them. And I ask the same question, by the way. I asked all of these leaders, I asked all of these governments exactly the same questions. Why didn't these governments do something? Actually, from a Muslim point of view, Al-Aqsa Mosque is not a Palestinian place. It's not owned by the Palestinians, by the way. So even if suppose, for example, that the whole Palestinian people decided on one day that they would abandon Al-Aqsa and gave it to the Israelis, any Muslim around the world, from Bangladesh, from Britain, from India, from Syria, from Algeria, from Morocco, from Nigeria, from South Africa, from Australia, any Muslim around the world can come and stop the Palestinian people and say, you have no right to give the Al-Aqsa Mosque for anybody, because it's not yours, it is ours. It's for the whole Muslim Ummah. That is the thing that Muslims need to understand. We need to have Al-Aqsa as an issue of, it needs to be connected to each and every Muslim's life in general. And in particular, every single one has to give Al-Aqsa Mosque its full attention. Why? Because when we have something Al-Aqsa Mosque is related to your life as a Muslim with every aspect. We pray 5 times a day. And by the way, the 5 prayers in Islam were, ask any child in any Muslim country, they would tell you that the 5 prayers were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ during the night journey. And that's not my point. It was revealed in the night journey. It was obligated during the night journey, but in heaven from a Muslim understanding. When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ descended from heaven with the 5 prayers, with the 5 obligatory daily prayers, the first ever piece of land on earth that welcomed the 5 prayers was Al-Aqsa. So because he descended to Al-Aqsa Mosque, and from Al-Aqsa Mosque he went back to Mecca. So before the 5 prayers that you pray as a Muslim every day arrived at your home, whether you are, for example, in London, in Washington, D.C., in Kuala Lumpur, in Mumbai, in wherever, before it arrived to you, it passed through Al-Aqsa. So that means that every single Muslim amongst us needs to pray to remember Al-Aqsa Mosque at least 5 times a day. It's not a humanitarian issue. It is not a political issue. It is a religious issue. It is related to each and every one of you. And we need to understand that this is your personal duty as a Muslim. And that is the thing that every single Muslim on earth need to understand and apply in their lives as well.
But also, this is not the first time in history that Muslims almost lose Jerusalem, or there is a contentious history in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
What does history teach us from this moment?
History teaches us that there is no occupation or injustice or mischief that can live forever in Jerusalem. Injustice cannot live in Jerusalem, and corruption cannot live in Jerusalem. Occupation cannot live in Jerusalem. And this happened during the Crusades. Jerusalem was lost for 87 years. So during that time, Muslims almost just, it was as if it was lost forever in some places. I've read some books that were written during that time by some historians, such as al-Idrisi, for example, who was, I don't want to say a pro-crusader, but he believed that the Crusaders were here to stay and that they would never ever leave. And when you read for al-Idrisis, you feel that it was as if he was speaking in our time by some people in our time, by on the exactly the same tongue, exactly the same language. And at the end, the Crusaders left back to their homes and the Al-Aqsa Mosque was liberated. And this is the thing that will happen in Jerusalem as well. This occupation that came from Europe will come to an end by any means in Al-Aqsa Mosque. And Al-Aqsa Mosque will be liberated again